want to thank the Norton Media Center for putting this on for us. And today with me, I have the Veteran Service Officer from Attleboro, who has a lot of experience with working with Vietnam veterans. So this is Ken Badertscher. And Ken, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Julie. It's certainly an honor to be here. I have served as the Director of Veteran Services for the City of Attleboro since 2015. Prior to that, I had a similar role in the City of Boston. And the short version of the story is our mission at both of those places is just to improve the lives of veterans who come into our office. We help them gain access to benefits that are available to them through the VA. Lots of people know about what's going on at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. So at the federal level, we'll file paperwork and we'll monitor those claims and we'll help get people access to those benefits. The state of Massachusetts leads the way in the delivery of veteran services and benefits. So there's a lot of things. I've got these red bound books in my office that I love handing out, something to the tune of 65 pages worth of benefits that are unique to Massachusetts. You have to be a Massachusetts resident and then often a veteran or maybe a service disabled veteran in order to gain access to these benefits. So I love educating people about that. And I also try to network with local nonprofit organizations and community groups just to make sure that benefits that are offered here locally our veterans can gain access to, because sometimes the VA does a really great job and the state of Massachusetts does a really great job, but sometimes there are needs that go unmet, and that's where community organizations really step in and help out our veterans.
Excellent. So what kind of experience do you have with a military veteran or a military personnel?
So we get, on the typical day, we'll field phone calls. At least 10 to 15 people will walk into the office and we're setting up appointments. It's a very busy office over in Attleboro, and the typical month will include over 320 to 350 contacts with veterans in the local community. I'm charged with taking care of 2,700 veterans who live in Attleboro, and there's a guy or a gal like me in every city and town in Massachusetts. Elsewhere in the country, you don't find a veteran service officer until you reach the county level of government, and I couldn't imagine being in charge of a county like Miami, for example, and some of the surrounding communities there, trying to take care of all of those veterans all at once. I feel like I've got my hands full with the charge that I have. But no, like I said, I've been at it since 2015, 2014, and it's constant education. Constantly things are changing, and I try to stay abreast of everything that's going on to make sure that our veterans and our community have access to everything that they're owed.
So what allows you to connect with the veterans? I mean, do you have experience of your own as a veteran?
Yes, actually, that's a great question, because you have to be a veteran in Massachusetts to be a veteran service officer. And the state defines what a veteran is based on active duty days. So I served in the U.S. Air Force for 8 years. I was a fighter jet mechanic from 2004 to 2012. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan and a slew of other bases all over the world just on temporary duties. But I was, as I mentioned, a fighter jet mechanic. I had my name on the side of different F-15s, F-16s, and A-10s throughout my career.
It's exciting.
So it was, I got to see and do a lot thanks to my military service. So to answer your question, there's that immediate connection with any veteran that walks into the office, because at a minimum, it doesn't matter what your service looks like or what my service looks like. There's some level of shared connection, and we can always, swap war stories, or at least compare notes on where we went to basic military training if it comes down to that. But that's critical, because I get the opportunity to hear folks out, connect with them, and sometimes they'll come in and they'll ask on a high level, what are my benefits? What am I eligible for? And you got to kind of interview them to get down to, well, what do you need? And compare that to my knowledge of the system and what's out there that can help you the most, what's going to be most impactful for you. So you got to kind of connect with somebody, build that relationship, and make sure that they're taken care of.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot when we speak to veterans about that connection. And I think in particular, that's one thing I found with some of the Vietnam veterans that I've spoken to. It's very, very difficult to talk until you can find that connection. Do you find the same thing?
Absolutely. So there's a difference in the way that the country handled those veterans coming back. When I came back, both from Iraq and Afghanistan, It was a ticker tape parade, and thank you for your service, and we're so grateful. And the shameful truth is that when Vietnam veterans came back, it wasn't always, it was almost never that way for them. They weren't thanked for their service, and there wasn't a welcome home party and this sort of thing. And many Vietnam veterans would never even openly admit that they were veterans because it would damage their ability to get a job, for example. So it's really trying to connect with veterans and let them know that climate has changed. We are very thankful for the service and sacrifice that the Vietnam veterans gave, and we want to tell them every opportunity we have, welcome home, and we appreciate what you did for us, and we try to work on ways to do that all the time.
And I think one thing that's very important, and I know with the Vietnam veterans, there is quite a few of them that have stories to tell, but hold those stories inside. And I know that we have the Vietnam Veteran Moving Wall coming to Attleboro soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that's an important event, especially when it comes to the Vietnam veterans?
So thank you for bringing that up. It's really one of the most powerful projects I think I've ever had the opportunity to work on is the planning that goes into bringing the moving wall to Attleboro. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. is one of the most iconic veterans memorials in our country. It's the black granite, it's all the names, it's really just the solemnity and the power of that memorial. And the National Park Service says that over 3 million visitors go to the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. every year, but that's only scratching the surface for the American population more broadly and all of our Vietnam veterans. We did an informal poll with the community going out to the American Legion posts, for example, and it was no big scientific thing, but roughly half of the Vietnam era veterans that we had spoken to had never been to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
to see the memorial that our nation erected in their honor. And that's why the moving wall is such a great thing. Is John Devitt in 1982 attended the opening ceremony for the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., and he knew that there were going to be people that never got over the fact that a part of them stayed behind in Vietnam. They came home, but a part of them stayed in Vietnam. And there are going to be folks who to this day don't openly admit that they served and they were because of the way that they were treated because when they came home. So there's plenty of folks, as we mentioned, that just have never taken the opportunity to go. And John Devitt had the foresight to understand that and said, we got to bring this to the people. We got to put it in their backyard and make it sure that there's no way that they can avoid it because it's such a powerful experience. And so since 1984, it took them a while to put the moving wall together, but since 1984, there's been 2 iterations of the wall traveling the country and going to various communities, about 30 per year, and Attleboro is lucky to be included in this year.
They really are. And so that people know that when this is, because I'm sure there's folks out there that would not want to miss this. Could you tell us the dates, the times, and where? Sure, thank you.
So the moving wall is coming to Attleboro this September the 26th, and it'll be here through September the 30th. It'll be set up at what's formerly known as the Highland Country Club. The city owns it now, and we call it a park, so it's Highland Park. Right, the GPS address is 104 Mechanic Street for the GPS cripples like me. But it's going to be set up there in the fields. We're going to take care of the fields because they've lain fallow since the city picked it up, and it's going to be a really wonderful presentation. And the solemnity and the quiet and the opportunity for introspection that location offers, I think, is really going to make it an impactful event, and we're really looking forward to that. So September the 26th through the 30th. Cool thing is every evening at 6 o'clock, starting on that Thursday the 26th, we will be having some sort of ceremony. We'll be dedicating each day to a different theme. So for example, Thursday is Gold Star families. And then we'll do for Vietnam veterans, for women who served. And each day is a different theme. And for more on that, folks can either contact my office or hop on our website at attleboromovingwall.org.
Very good. So before I let you go, and thank you for that, that was our little public service announcement, and I want to make sure that people really understand how important this event is, and you just don't want to miss this. You don't get to see this very often, and we have it right here in Attleboro, so please come out. But before I let any of the veterans go, there's a couple of questions that I like to ask, and one of those questions is, what is the one thing, if you had to pick one, that was the most significant thing that you remember about your service with the military?
So probably the most significant thing that I took away from my military service would be the basic skills of leadership and followership. There's so much that, and I talk about this all the time when we're talking about trying to get veterans good jobs. There's just so much in the way of soft skills that is offered through formal training and through informal, actually hands-on experience in the military that corporations want. When you show up that first day at basic military training, I don't know about you, but I didn't know the difference between a sergeant and a chief master sergeant and a captain and a major. But by the end of that time there, you definitely very clearly understand what chain of command is and where you fit into the overall structure. And by the way, you start at the very bottom. Right. But just the basic concept of, I understand how this organization works, and I understand what my role is inside it, is something that the military is very good at teaching all service members. And those basic tenets of leadership and followership, and some of the things that corporations desperately are looking for that cannot be taught in a classroom. You really got to get after it and have that experience in order to walk away with the ability to do that.
Great, thank you. And in terms of military, and particularly the Vietnam veteran, for people that have never been in the military and don't really grasp or maybe understand as much as we understand what goes on behind the scenes, and when everybody's at the post talking and things, what would you want to tell somebody to make them understand? I know that's the tough question. What would you want people to know about that population or any deploying population?
Probably the one thing that I would want everybody to know is that not every veteran comes back damaged. There's this social stigma about everybody who goes to war comes back with post-traumatic stress. Yeah. And while it is true that the veteran population experiences things that the civilian population is never exposed to, these are people that are hardworking and can really get after it. And I mentioned earlier that there's 2,700 veterans in Attleboro. I'm only in routine contact with a small portion of that number. My office is open to anybody who wants to talk to me, and I'm actively trying to get out there and get in front of additional folks, but the vast majority of the veterans who live in our community are doing just fine. And I think that that's probably the big takeaway is not everybody comes back from war damaged, and in many ways, people will come back and be able to execute on a higher level, and they build on those experiences.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I think that's great. That's a great point that you make. I'd like to think that I'm on a higher level.
I think so too, Colonel. I think so.
That's debatable. So I want to thank you for coming and taking the time to speak to us. I'm sure it was very informative for people. Do you have any parting words, any last things that you'd like to say, anything that we might have missed?
No, I would just like to take the opportunity to thank you for inviting me on the show, and thank Norton Media Center for helping us get the word out about the fact that the Vietnam Wall the moving wall is coming to Attleboro. And the one thing that I think would be a failure to me about this event, because in saying that, it sounds so strange because it's going to be difficult to run a bad event, right? Just having it there, just having it set up, we're going to have so much of an opportunity to do so much good in the community. But the one point of failure that I think that I'll beat myself up for a while is if somebody comes to me afterwards and says, "Ken, I didn't know it was coming, and I really wanted to see it." And definitely take the opportunity to tell everybody you know that it's coming. And if you know it's coming, take the opportunity to come down and check it out, because it's going to be a really amazing experience.
I agree. Don't miss it. Thank you.
Thank you.